It's a real delight to be offering this book, my new book, Your Deepest Ground, A Guide to Embodied Spirituality. And this has been gestating for some time and is actually the third book in a series. My first book was In Touch and dealt with the sense of inner knowing and briefly addressed the question of the ground. My second book, The Deep Heart, really focused on the heart center and the multidimensional nature of it. And this third book is really dealing with the ground. When I say ground, I'm using it in two terms. One is a felt sense, a subtle feeling, sensation in the body of really landing here, really being in our body, being present, vibrantly alive. So it's a felt sense, but also a metaphor, and a metaphor for being in touch with reality. I see the three books as being a kind of trilogy and a fruition of my work, both as a now retired depth psychotherapist and also as a spiritual teacher, because I weave between these levels of psychological conditioning and our essential spiritual nature. And many, many readers and listeners in these wisdom traditions who are interested in the process of awakening and discovering true nature are also dealing with their conditioning. And I find it's really helpful to be able to include both of these subjects in this conversation. So the subtitle of the book is A Guide to Embodied Spirituality. And this is really important because I find in my work with people who are on the spiritual quest, very often it stays on a mental level. There's an intellectual understanding, maybe a really clear intellectual understanding, but it has not translated or transposed to people's lives. And so they continue to get tangled up in the same issues in relationship and reactive emotions and having difficulty with work and finding direction in life. So waking up out of our story is a powerful and important first step. But we also need to wake down. That is to say, for awareness to descend not only through the mental level, but into our emotional level and into our instinctual level as well. It needs to suffuse and infuse the body so it becomes more and more of a lived experience. And a lot of spiritual practitioners get stuck here. Either they separate out their humanity and try to transcend it, and you can sometimes briefly, but it always comes around again, life being what it is and our humanity being what it is. Or on the other side, people can do a lot of work on themselves, psychological work, in order to improve themselves, to better themselves, to be a better person, and completely overlook this profound freedom and wholeness, which is here always, and thus not know their deepest self. And I find that both domains are important. And if we are deeply engaged in a spiritual investigation, meaning what's essential, what's most important in life, what is the underlying reality, then we are going to have to negotiate our humanity as we do so. We're going to have to really become intimate. And it doesn't mean fixing ourselves, it doesn't mean improving ourselves, it doesn't mean digging for problems, but it means actually being with our experience as it arises and being authentic. And so that's what embodiment is about, an open-ended, ongoing process of living in greater accord with our inner knowing, bringing in the psychological, the energetic, and subtle and non-dual dimensions, I think is something new and important and relevant to the embodiment of our spiritual understanding, our deepest knowing. Why is the ground so important, and particularly the deepest dimension of the ground? When we open to the groundless ground, or the ground of being, we feel profoundly at ease. In other words, we all face difficult challenges of life as human beings, but how we are with them can be very, very different depending on how deeply intimate we are with our own hearts and our own ground. So there's a stability, a spaciousness, a sense of being at home, an ease of being that just spontaneously arises. We are also in touch with a profound creativity, a profound life force that is intimate but not personal, that flows through us and flows through all beings. A power, a creative power that is not a power over anyone, but a power that is beneficent, is life-giving, a truly creative and life-supportive power. It also, being in touch with our deepest ground, liberates the heart to be shared freely in our relationships and in our life, in our work. The essential qualities of the heart, compassion, gratitude, love, kindness, are freed, actually. Generosity, courage are just freed quite naturally to be expressed in spontaneous and appropriate ways. So the ground provides a foundation for our humanity to be optimally expressed. So this book describes some of the major challenges of opening to the ground. I've found that this area has not been well articulated, particularly in the West, and particularly for spiritual practitioners and explorers. So I do offer a kind of mapping of the territory, but I also offer a number of experiential exercises, if you will, meditations and inquiries that you can practice on your own, questions you can ask and sit with, or guided meditations to really open to this sense of the ground. And I divide the book into 3 parts. So the first part, framing this as an underground journey, is preparation. And preparation, in part, is having a map, a good enough description, an adequate map of the territory that we're going to be exploring in a direct way. And then what an optimal attitude is. And that attitude is one of honesty and vulnerability. It's very important because it's a challenging descent. To be willing, honesty, not being judgmental, but just being honest with ourselves. What is our actual experience? Vulnerable, being willing to open into that experience. It's an unveiling process. It's a process of recognizing, questioning, seeing through these veils that create a freeze or contraction. To know that it's all right to let go. Because we're afraid of losing control. Control is very important to us as egoic beings, as separate selves. And yet too much control gets in the way. And we find actually we have much less control than we think. And we need much less control than we think. And so there's a whole section about recognizing and releasing control. And I also use a lot of brief transcripts of my interchanges with students, either in person or online, to illustrate various people's experience of having resistance, facing it, releasing it, letting go, and opening to a deeper ground. And the third section, which is much shorter, is the fruition. What happens? How does this impact our life? Why is this important? And as I've suggested, the opening of our deepest ground gives us an anchoring in silence and source. It gives a foundation that's both spacious and steady, beyond safety or unsafety, that really allows our humanity to blossom and flourish on all sorts of levels, personal, individual levels. It actually supports the individuation process and supports the full flowering of the heart.